Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. Welcome back to the Catholic Citizen, episode number 22, 21, whatever it is. It's going to be a great show. We're talking about the border, MLB, AllStar Game, and the fact that Jesus Christ is back as well in just a second. All right, friends, great to be back with you. Did you miss me? Good Friday. I took the day off to be at home, to pray, to really focus on the great sacrifice of Jesus Christ, our King, who is now risen from the grave. Alleluia. What a gift it is to have this confidence and this hope and this belief that no matter what darkness we as Catholic citizens might face, we can believe in the resurrection. We can believe that God is at work, even in the midst of the messiness of our nation right now, to bring about truth, justice, love, and mercy moving forward. So excited to continue the show with you this second half now of the year. But first, we got to talk a little bit about Awaken Catholic and this great community that's growing here. We have a great app. We've got a great website you can donate to as well. So let's take a look at that. First and foremost, the app, that there's this growing community of individuals getting together where we can talk about issues of politics, of family life, and we can do it in love and mutual respect. So please download the app today. We just found out there's now 500 members of the app online, starting this new awesome Catholic community from people all across the country. So download the app today. Secondly, we need your help to continue producing these fantastic shows. So please go to awakencatholic.org/donate today and maybe say, I'm donating to the Catholic Citizen because you really like this show and you want to see it continue. Lastly, have I ever told you how much I love the people and the cleaning capabilities of Casa Bea Cleaning? No one is as good as Casa Bea. So if you don't support Casa Bea, you don't support me. All right? So please go to Casa Bea Cleaning today, whether it's your home, whether it's a place where you work. You need to support Casa Bea because Casa Bea supports us. Casa Bea and us, we're like this. So support Casa Bea Cleaning today. All right, now on today's show, folks. So much going on in the country. How do I narrow this down to just 3 stories that I'm going to cover today? I don't know. It's somewhat of a miracle, but this show is somewhat of a miracle. So let's get to it. First, the border is in crisis. No matter if the administration wants to say it or not, we have a crisis on our southern border. Now, let me first say this. I was, and I still am, a critic of the way that President Trump, the way that he spoke about the immigration issue. We need leadership on this issue. And, you know, when President Trump said, for example, in 2015, when he really denigrated immigrants and people from Mexico, he said, quote, when Mexico sends its people, they are not sending their best, end quote. I mean, that language, it's inflammatory. It doesn't call us to have a courageous conversation over a comprehensive immigration reform, which is what this country really needs. And, you know, we want people to come to this nation, but the reality is the way that President Biden has now addressed this issue is not good either. It's a case where we need to balance both justice and mercy. We can be a nation of laws, but then also welcome immigrants into our nation. So where were we today with President Biden's policies and what he said? Because all during the campaign, right, he said, I want immigrants to come. I want immigrants to come. Well, when you just simply just make that a blank statement, you say, well, we don't have to respect our borders and people don't have to apply legally for immigration and so on and so forth, you have the crisis that you have today. So Biden officials encountered 172,000 migrants at the border in March. That's a 71% increase from February and the latest indicator of the extent of the crisis now at the border. Now, of those 172,000 migrants, the majority were single adults, but it included 18,890 unaccompanied children. That's a 100% increase from already high numbers encountered in February. It's the highest number, in fact, ever recorded of unaccompanied children coming across the border. The crisis is so bad in these facilities that some kids are being asked to take turns sleeping on the floor. There's also reports of kids not having food during the day. So first, please pray, especially for these unaccompanied children that are coming across the border, that are being sent across. And this is a humanitarian crisis, and I want you to understand this. Governor Abbott from Texas is reporting that some of the facilities are reporting incidences of sexual assault, insufficient staffing, children, again, not eating through the day, and children who have tested positive for COVID-19 being with children who have tested negative. All right, so first and foremost, you have a humanitarian crisis at the border, but there's also a financial crisis as well that we have to acknowledge. The Biden administration is spending at least $60 million per week to house the more than 16,000 migrant miners. So this is back when it was just 16,000 migrant miners there at the border. Now, if you expend that over a year, that's $3.1 billion per year. Now, Jen Psaki and Joe Biden, President Biden, they're all saying, hey, it's not a crisis at the border. You know, you guys are just making up a story, so on and so forth. Look, if you're spending $3.1 billion a year to house migrants on the border, that's a crisis, folks. Thirdly, and this is really interesting about this story, so you have a humanitarian crisis, you have the financial crisis, now you have, interestingly enough, the Biden administration rethinking not only their tone, but their policy as well. So Biden Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said during a conversation with Immigration and Customs Exchange employees last week that the administration was considering finishing gaps in the wall. Yes, that's right. The wall that, Joe Biden and others railed against, that how dare they build a wall and so on and so forth. Now they're talking about finishing the gaps in the wall. Maybe that's because it makes sense that you have locks on your own doors, for example, so that people that you don't know can't necessarily come in. Again, it doesn't mean that we can't reach out and help people who are experiencing themselves in their home countries a humanitarian crisis. But when you have complete open borders, it leads to the chaos that we're seeing today. All right, fourth. Now, this goes beyond the humanitarian and financial crisis, though. It's also a crisis of national security. It's another reason we need strong borders. 2 illegal immigrants from Yemen have been arrested by U.S. Customs and Border Protection near Calexico, California. Both men were included on the FBI's terrorism watch list and no-fly list, okay? So terrorists are literally being arrested on the border. Now, thank God that these 2 men were apprehended, but if 170,000 are coming every single month, how many drug dealers, human traffickers, and terrorists are making it across the border undetained? Friends, we can be a compassionate nation. We can recognize the tremendous attributes and tremendous gifts that immigrants bring to this nation. But we can also be a just nation, a nation that has laws, that has borders. It's time to fix our broken immigration system. And unfortunately, we didn't see that leadership from our former president, and we're not seeing that today from our current president as well. All right, next up, MLB moving to Colorado. Speaking of our current president, Joe Biden, another area where he's failing to lead is in this area of language and racial justice. Now, again, a lot of people voted for him because they thought he would be better, even in the context of racial justice. But Georgia just signed a new voting rights law in place, and President Biden came out irresponsibly and called this, quote, the Jim Crow in the 21st century. It is, quote, an atrocity, saying that the Justice Department is taking a look at the measure. So what did Georgia do? Well, let's take a look at the bill. Number one, nearly 2.7 million Georgians voted early during the 2020 general election, and the new law will offer more opportunities for early voting in most of Georgia's counties. There will be at least 17 days of early voting. That's more than many states in the country. So this current law that Joe Biden calls the Jim Crow of the 21st century actually expands voting. Secondly, yes, it does require an ID now to vote, but it's not as strict as you even might think. Previously in Georgia, a form of identification was required for voting in person, but not for voting absentee by mail. The new law requires those requesting returning ballots by mail to also submit a driver's license number or state ID number. If the voter does not have one, he or she can submit a photocopy of a different form of identification. Does that seem overly strict to you? Does that seem suppressing votes to you? You need an ID for about 1 million things in this country. Okay, as simple things as picking up tickets at a baseball game will call. But we're not requiring a voter ID if you're sending in a mail-in absentee ballot. Why would people be fighting this so hard? So the woke mom, including through the leadership of President Biden, came back and said, well, we're going to boycott Georgia. And the Major League Baseball Association said, we're going to actually move the AllStar Game that was planned to be in Atlanta. We're going to move it out of there. We're going to send it to Denver, Colorado. Now, this is significant for a few different reasons. Georgia, with the new law, has 17 days of early voting. Colorado has 15. So they're actually moving the All-Star Game to a more restrictive state when it comes to voting. They also have a photo ID requirement for voting, the state of Colorado. So yeah, this makes sense to send it to Colorado because clearly they have the same things that Georgia has. Now, beyond all this, the president calling this the new Jim Crow law. According to 2019 U.S. Census data, the Major League Baseball Association is moving this game to Denver, where in Atlanta, you have a population that's 51% Black or African American and 40.9% white. In Denver, Colorado, it's 9.2% Black and 76% white. So you're moving the game that literally would bring billions of dollars into the city of Atlanta, helping Black communities and minority communities. And you're moving the game out of there because this voter suppression law is supposedly racist, moving it to a predominantly white city in Denver, Colorado. Friends, this is just one more example of how woke white liberal elites think that they're coming in to help the African-American community, that the African-American community can't be helped without them. And so let's move the All-Star Game to a more white city. It's just like the defund the police movement. One of these progressive slogans that got out there. You know who that hurts? Minority communities in Minneapolis and New York City where they actually defunded the police and then crime skyrocketed. If you actually go to talk to people on the ground who live in these communities, they said, no, we don't want to defund the police. We want more police in our communities. But, again, progressive elites coming in and pushing these insane ideas on individuals and communities saying, hey, we know what's best for you. We know what's best. Lastly, another area where this president is failing to lead, and we've highlighted this obviously a lot in the show, but he is an incredibly pro-abortion president. His new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is rolling back the Trump administration's policies on abortion and religious freedom. This week, the State Department released its annual report on human rights violations. Now, they announced that a woman's access to birth control and abortion will now be considered a human right, which the State Department is going to be monitoring now around the world. So on par now with the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to say migrate, the State Department, our U.S. State Department is saying on par with those things is the right to an abortion, is the right to contraception. And they're taking our taxpayer dollars, our resources of people in the State Department, and they're asking them, hey, don't pay attention to Uyghurs in China, the Muslim minority that's being abused, sterilized, and killed in China. Don't focus on those types of things. Don't focus on, sex-selective abortions in India, for example, where girls are literally being killed just because they're girls. Don't focus on those things. No, focus on those countries where they're restricting access to reproductive health care, where they're restricting, how dare they, women from being able to kill their own children. That's what our State Department's now going to be focused on when it comes to human rights violations. Catholics, Christians, people of goodwill, when are you going to wake up to the reality when you support individuals who support policies that go against the pro-life teaching of our church that has detrimental and serious impacts on people across the globe? It's absolutely maddening. So look, I don't come on this show to tell you who to vote for, but I'm not going to shy away from telling you who you should not be voting for. Don't vote for someone who doesn't protect with maximum determination life in the womb. Don't vote for someone whose administration restricted reporters' access to border facilities because they were afraid of the political fallout. Hint, That wasn't the last administration. That happened a month ago. Number 3, don't vote for someone who likens requiring an ID to vote as being akin to an absolute disgusting and putrid Jim Crow laws in our nation's history. This hyperbole is not helpful. Rather, friends, it's just frustrating. We were told that, and I heard this from so many people, that they voted for this man because we were told that he has the best character to lead our nation. There's a lack of character if you're not defending unborn, innocent children. There's a lack of character if you're covering up things that are happening on the border. There's a lack of character if you're likening a simple voter ID law to Jim Crow laws. Friends, more than ever now, let me end the show just by focusing on the man who rose from the grave, the man that we need to be focusing on as Catholic Christians and as Catholic citizens. So let me turn now to Easter a little bit, where we're celebrating even right now to this day. It's the octave of Easter. We're celebrating. This is Easter Day for us in the Catholic Church. We continue to celebrate the joy of Jesus Christ, that despite the bad leadership we have in the country, we have good leadership in heaven. And we have a leader in heaven who cares about what's going on here on earth. He wants to build the kingdom here. And yes, it does involve working through the government. So let me direct you to Bishop Malesic from Cleveland. And forgive me, Bishop, if I mispronounce your name, but he was talking about the Gospel of St. John, and this just really struck me about the reality of the resurrection. But he says, quote, "Why does the Gospel of St. John make such a fuss over the burial clothes of Jesus being found in the empty tomb and the cloth covering his head rolled up and placed in a separate place?" Well, St. John Chrysostom comments on this saying, "The body of Jesus was buried with much myrrh, which glues linen to the body even more firmly than lead." So the body of Jesus given myrrh, and then the shroud, the burial cloth would have been put on top of Jesus, and it would have connected the skin of Christ, the battered, beaten, wounded, bloodied skin, to that burial cloth like lead. It would have been stuck together. This is important to note, the bishop says. At the time the Gospel of John was written, there were rumors that the body of Jesus had been stolen. Remember that at first Mary also thought someone had taken the body of Jesus. But no grave robber would have taken the time to tediously remove the glued-on cloth from the body of Jesus there in the tomb and then fold it up nice and neat. St. John, by highlighting the burial cloths found in the empty tomb, is making a statement. The statement is this: the empty tomb is an act of God. My friends, today in this country, this nation, our church, and our very own hearts, the only thing that will save us is an act of God. But don't worry. Be not afraid. The act of God has happened. Jesus Christ has risen from the grave. He has defeated sin and death itself. So what are you afraid of? Go out there. Preach the truth in love, in mercy and compassion. But above all, brothers and sisters, preach. See you next week on The Catholic Citizen.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.